Hello everyone, my name is Hafsa and the topic that I have chosen to study is the effect of YouTube crime documentaries, that is, whether they have a positive or negative influence. So, several studies have looked at the relationship between viewing of violent content and the incidents of violence. Some were unethical, while the others talked about potential positive and negative effects. My study hopes to resolve these issues by looking at the actual effects of these videos in an ethical way. So, as mentioned before, several studies have been conducted on this topic. Among them were Banduras and Cats. Bandura et al. Study found that children became more violent the more they watched violent content. Katz et al. Study defied Bandura's and found that people's effect of violent content depends on their age. They called this the uses and gratifications theory. Unlike Bandura and Katz et al., these other researchers looked at the effects of crime documentaries themselves. Strand found that Indian documentaries on rape victims could make the perpetrators seem justified but could also affect the policies positively. Morton found that producers of documentaries manipulate audiences by playing music in the background, not conveying the facts properly, and by not showing their personal bias on the topic. Waxman stated that documentaries have led to innocent people being released from prison and a criminal confessing to his crimes, so she mentioned positive effects. Rickard said that documentaries reflect the view of the dominant class. Also, they show the criminals in a positive light, while the victims in a negative one. Yuxi found that documentaries related to a Nigerian civil war made certain segments of the population to view the government negatively. However, the Nigerian government is partially blamed for causing this negativity. Brucey said that crime documentaries try to show that people were wrongfully convicted by law enforcement agencies. This could lead to actual prisoners from being released from prisons. So the research questions that my study hopes to answer are the following. 1. Do crime documentaries on YouTube negatively impact audiences, such as by making them feel fascinated or making them desensitized? 2. Are there any benefits, if any, of watching these crime documentaries? In other words, do these crime documentaries tell people how to protect themselves and others? This study answered these questions by conducting content analysis on YouTube crime documentaries and the comments posted on them. It also answered them by conducting surveys and looking at the answers that were generated. Moreover, the study collected both quantitative and qualitative data. So the methodology is that I selected 10 videos in total. 2 were taken from each channel. The channels included the following: Mr. Nightmare, Chilling Scares, Lazy Masquerade, Nexpo, and Scare Theater. The videos were my independent variables. The dependent variables included the length of comments, the number of serious comments with emojis, the number of funny comments with emojis, the number of comments with thumbnails instead of emojis, and the length of the comments. The content of the videos was analyzed separately, and the data that I generated for these videos was qualitative. And apart from conducting a content analysis on the videos and their comments, I conducted 2 surveys. The first asked about respondents' viewing habits, whether they learned something positive or negative, and whether they would recommend other people to watch these videos. The second survey went more in depth and asked participants the first time they viewed the documentaries and how their friends or family members reacted to those documentaries. So the results were that Mr. Nightmare's and Lazy Masquerade's videos involve narration of the YouTubers themselves, and the story they tell are other people's. Plus, they don't usually include actual pictures or videos from the crime scenes. Chilling Scares, Nexpos, and Scare Theater's video also include stories of other people and the YouTubers narrating them. However, they also include actual videos and pictures of the crime scene. The perceived reality of the incidents mentioned are reflected on the comments posted on them. Since Mr. Nightmare's and Lazy Masquerade's videos were taken less seriously. The comments on these videos were shorter and included more funny emojis. The exception is one of Lazy Masquerade's videos. On the other hand, since the other YouTubers' videos seemed to talk about actual events, the comments posted on them were longer, included almost no emojis, and had thumbnails instead of emojis. Chilling Scares had the most thumbnails, whereas Nexpo and Scare Theater had more longer comments. The findings of the survey indicated the participants were terrified while watching these videos. However, they still learned something from these videos and shared it to their friends. The exception was one of the participants in my second survey. She said that such videos only have negative effects and she didn't share them to her friends and family members. So the conclusion is that all this proves that YouTube crime documentaries can have positive and negative effects. Of course, there were several weaknesses so to resolve these weaknesses, future studies could have a larger sample. They could also include people from different age groups. Plus, they could use random sampling. Also, they can operationalize the definition of YouTube crime documentaries. I call them videos that are uploaded on YouTube or 10 to 15 minutes in length and talked about crime. I should have added are narrated by people who didn't experience the event and are either in first person or third person perspective. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. And if you have any questions, please let me know.